Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Fight Site interview. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing Amir Albazi, who you most recently saw fight on Yas Island on this past weekend's card. First of all, Amir, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, thank you.
Before we get into it, I just want to first shout out the Fight Site, obviously. Go check us out, thefightsite.com. You can check us out on Patreon as well. It really does help us when you support us. There's different tiers. You get access to the Discord, ask questions on the podcast, access to exclusive content, and all of that. Make sure you check out the Fight Site shop. Merchandise. It really does directly help us even further. Go check us out on YouTube. We have tons of awesome videos, breakdowns, and interviews, such as the one we're going to be doing today. Make sure you check us out on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating, a comment. It really does help us. Share it with your friends. Check out hyperbrandfly.com. It is a jiu-jitsu gi and no gi brand, but they also have lifestyle brand as well. Sweatshirts, t-shirts, shorts, and pants. Please go check them out. They're great stuff. Check them out, and click the link on the bottom of the page on thefightsite.com. With all of that out of the way, Amir,
Yes.
we only have a very short amount of time with you, so I'm going to try and condense these interviews. Usually I do a longer form, but first of all, congratulations on your fight. Beautiful triangle choke in your UFC debut. Tell us how you're feeling. Tell us what it was like, and let's talk about that performance, because I mean, I wrote about it, but I got the man himself with me. Talk to me about it.
No, I felt good. I felt really good, and when I feel good, I finish people in the first round. You can see on my record, I always try to finish fights in the early on. If I have the chance, I can always try to go for the finish.
Yeah, if anybody looks at your record, you're a finishing machine, I would say. You've got 7 submissions, 5 by strikes, and at flyweight, that's actually really not the most common thing. So it's actually really impressive that you're doing it at flyweight, and that's going to definitely help you going forward with because that was exciting. You kind of beat on him. So I want to talk about the actual, your control on the ground and your experience, because you're very young. You're only 26. You're actually, 3 years younger than me, but you've been fighting for a really long time. Your first fight was in 2009, and you were like, what, 15, 16?
Yeah.
How did that happen? How did you get involved in fighting so young? And talk to us about your journey to fighting.
Funny, because I never started in jiu-jitsu. Like, even for my background in jiu-jitsu, I actually wanted to fight MMA. And when I was like 13, 14, just getting started, they didn't really let someone that young in Sweden at that time to do MMA. It wasn't that much of a sport back then. People looked down on it a bit. So I tried to look up different gyms. So I found this gym. I started training. They told me straight away, the only thing you can compete in is in jiu-jitsu. So I mostly did that just for the competition part. But I wanted to do MMA, and one day I stumbled on a clip on YouTube, actually, and I saw these like people in my age, 15, 16, they're doing like pro MMA fights, like with punches on the ground with 1 round of 10 minutes. So I went to the coach. I'm like, look at them, they are doing it. Why can I not do it? So he literally told me, listen, if you can get the guys together and go down to Portugal, you can do the fight. So that's exactly what I did. I asked the guys, they were on it, so we packed our stuff and went there. So I had my first MMA fight really early.
That was that's a hell of a story, and it's kind of crazy. And you had 4 fights between 2009 and 2010, and then you took a break. So I want
2 fights on the same night that show.
So you went old school.
Yeah, it was like a tournament. Some guys actually did 3. So I remember I had actually 2 fights on the same night.
I'm just remembering myself as a teenager, and I wasn't fighting. But you did take a break after 2010 to 2014, and I wanted to know, like, was that why did you decide to stop, or was it your coaches that talked to you and said, listen, you got to take more time to train? What was it that made you take that 4-year break or so?
I remember the gym I started people stopped kind of doing MMA. Like people were, the training wasn't like, in the end it was like 3 people in the MMA classes. So they literally said like, we're just gonna focus on grappling. So basically no gi and jiu-jitsu.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that time, actually, Sweden supported jiu-jitsu, so they paid for your trips in the national team, and we competed under FILA at the time. So
Mm-hmm.
I started doing more of that. I wanted to, win more medals in jiu-jitsu, so I just, start training full time in just grappling, and we got a lot of medals. Became European champion, world champion, in that. But after that, I felt like I was like done with jiu-jitsu. The
Mm-hmm.
rules changed, and I didn't like how, people could win on advantage, but it wasn't
Uh-huh.
really a fight.
Oh yeah, trust me, I know very, very well.
Yeah, and I had good fights with them. They like the Meow brothers. I remember competing with them already when we were like blue belts. Fought them
Oh,
again at purple in the European chess. So like I was fighting good guys, but it was too boring for me to be honest. I always wanted to fight. I like to punch people in the face. So when they can win just by getting an advantage, it wasn't really my style.
I gotcha. And then in 2014, you restarted fighting again. And how did you get back into it? Where were you training? Where did you start training in 2014 that allowed you to get back into MMA? And how has your training progressed? Your philosophy, has your style progressed? Because you're very much it seems like you really prefer to pressure rather than fight off the back foot, and you're pretty good at it. So how did you develop your style on the feet and moving forward? Was it just that was you were drawn to, or is through your coaching and your training specifically they geared you towards that?
So I was. That is the time I actually moved from Sweden to London.
Right.
So it was one of the factors why I moved as well. I wanted to focus on MMA. I wanted to focus on what, like literally, why I started training. I wanted to be the, best in the world. So I decided to move to London and study. At the same time, I started training at London Shoot Fighters
Mm-hmm.
in London, which is a famous gym already with its own repetition. But it allowed me. I came mostly as a grappler with really basic like MMA skills, but they made me to what you saw in this debut last weekend.
Mm-hmm. And we saw some really excellent stuff there. So shout outs to London Shoot Fighters then, right?
Yes, and there's a lot more guys up and coming up from there, and in a couple of years, it's not gonna be only me on that show.
And I actually want to talk about your experience both on the feet and like you said, you came up through jiu-jitsu even though you really wanted to be a fighter. But some of the things that you utilized in your debut and obviously through your career as well, it was really impressive on the feet. Like you were using a really good pawing jab to draw reactions. You caught him a lot with a really good check hook, and were sliding back a lot out of the way of his leg kicks. There were a lot of feints thrown in. How much who is who is the main striking coach? Talk to us about the experience, coming up from a jiu-jitsu background and getting so adept at striking as well.
Yeah, they made it very, very good for me. The geniuses are Paul and Alexis at
Mm-hmm.
London Shoot. It's a very, very different coaching style what I'm used to, and it's really like it's on a different level. They understand fighting in and out. They've been in the game for more than 25 years. I feel at home. I feel like I'm in the right place. And I think it's not only me that's gonna shine from that gym soon. There's a lot more guys coming.
Feel free to shout them out towards the end if you want. Absolutely.
Yeah, Jared Bashra, Javid Bashra. We have a lot of guys already in Bellator. There's a lot of people coming up.
So we discussed how excellent your gym is, but we have to talk about during this, obviously with the pandemic and everything going on, training has obviously, I imagine, not been the same. So how have you been training going during what the pandemic, and what has it been like getting that training in, and then taking that short notice fight? You know, how were you able to game plan? Do you normally game plan a lot specifically for your individual opponents, or do you guys kind of go in with a general game plan of in every single fight and maybe pick a few things to try and do?
Yeah, so it's been, of course, with this whole pandemic, it's been different for than a normal training camp. We've been, pro fighters been gathering around and doing like our training and more running outside. I live also with another fighter, Diego, so we train at home as well. We
Hmm.
live together in the same house. I get always to do some work, but I feel confident in my skills. I don't really care if it's 10 days notice, 3 days notice, 3 hours of notice. I know what I can do in the cage when I go in, and I'm confident in my skills. So, and you saw in the debut, and this is just the beginning.
So what was the experience with going to the actual, I guess, Yas Island, and what was the procedure? Because I've spoken to a few people, and it's like everything is kind of short notice. They quickly grab you and they tell you, let's get you on a plane and get you out there. So can you talk about your experience, like when you got the call and when they gave you the opponent, and I guess from that time, what happened and how you got to Yas Island and the experience while you were there?
Literally the day before, I'm watching Masvidal on the UFC interview, like talking about last minute and how he took the fight and everything. And I wake up the next morning, I see a lot of like missed calls from my coach and my manager. So I pick up and they tell me there's a last minute fight on Fight Island. I just start laughing. I couldn't believe it. I was like watching that shit just the day before. So I couldn't say no. It was like meant to be. I said, yeah, let's go. So I went down to the gym, trained, did my last session, and they told me, you have to go to Heathrow now. I'm like, what do you mean now? They said, now. I'm like, okay, went back home, packed my stuff, and just ran off to the airport. And had to quarantine there for 2 days, then flying off to Abu Dhabi, then quarantining another 2 days. So it was different.
How did it affect your weight cut, or do you not cut a lot of weight?
No, of course it affected. It competed in bantamweight in the end.
Yeah.
So it's just because of with everything around it and such short notice. But next time you're gonna see me is gonna be in flyweight.
How did you feel fighting at bantamweight compared to your usual weight class of flyweight? Because that extra 10 pounds, like people are like, oh, it's only 10 pounds. But when you're talking about, 135, 125, that's a huge percentage of your body weight, right? So how did you feel? Did you feel better fighting at that weight, or did you not like it so much?
To be honest, I don't mind it. It have both of it have its pros and cons when it comes to strength and speed and other things involved. But I prefer flyweight. But a lot of people forget that I had my like 8-9 first fight. It was all in bantamweight, so I'm very
Right.
familiar with that weight class as well.
Hmm. I actually wanted to get a little bit more in depth into your jiu-jitsu game while I still have you on, because I really was impressed by a lot of the things you were doing on the ground. And first of all, if you ever come to New York, I would love to meet and train with you. We got to meet up at Marcelo's.
Yeah, that's not a problem.
So, and specifically when you were passing to mount, you did this really cool thing where you were able to shelve the leg and slide it through. Your passing game is just really, really smooth, and I feel like a lot of the MMA metagame of the ground, there's a lot of things that you're doing that I feel like is just really, really smooth, and you're aggressive. And I want to just talk about your general thought process and your philosophy on the ground and grappling, specifically in an MMA context. What are your philosophies? What are your thoughts? How do you're very finish oriented, obviously, and you seem to have a pretty good affinity for arm locks, which is why it was really nice to see a triangle. But four of your 7 wins are by an arm lock of some sort, either Kimura or armbar. So I want to just talk about your style, or let you talk about your style. on the ground?
I know that my jiu-jitsu is a little bit different than how it looks, like how it looks today. You know, I think it's like many reasons, but when I trained back home in Sweden, I had a good mix of. I had what we call Professor X in Sweden, my coach, who is in a wheelchair, who taught me like a different kind of jiu-jitsu, very smart jiu-jitsu, you know, very strategic and planned, you know. But in the same time, I was training with Alan do Nascimento. Alan Finpu is a very famous jiu-jitsu black belt. So I got a good mix, but I didn't like that jiu-jitsu start, like people start fighting on advantages and on points, then finishing fights. You know, I always gone with the idea to finish fights, and you can see that in my jiu-jitsu.
Absolutely. And you're one thing that also is impressive is that you're not like you said, you're always looking for the finish, but it's not strictly with submission grappling. You're very, very focused on landing strikes in those spaces on the ground, not just from positions of control, but in positions of transitions, and even from positions of submission. Specifically, if you want to look at the last fight, when you had him in that triangle and he was starting to fight it, you're just like, I'm gonna just elbow him in the head a lot until he either moves or just stays there and lets me elbow him. So
yeah. So sorry.
No, go ahead.
Now you go.
So my question is also, like, your ground and pound is really, really good, and it's also focused. It's not like wild, or it's there's a purpose to when you throw it. And ground and pound is something I'm just curious, like, because you can't like go full hard, I imagine, with ground and pound. So how do you train your ground and pound in particular, or even at the gym? Because it's really good the way you utilize it.
Yeah, so like I said, it all comes from the geniuses at London Shoot, but it's like you say, it's not just chaos, it's very planned chaos. So
Right. But so specific, right. So what I mean to that is, my question really is, when you're training, right? When you're training ground and pound, what kind of, I'm not sure how to phrase it. How do the coaches implement these training methods? So, like, you know how, like, when you're striking, you go, okay, we're going to do the jab right, we're going to do the jab right, and then we're going to lean back, and then we're going to fire with the check hook as you come in, pivot to the left, right? And that's a drill I'm assuming you can do. On the ground, with ground and pound, how do they do that or implement that kind of style, if they do, with the ground and pound training, is my question.
it's the same thing. It's combinations, body positioning, traps. There's a lot of things involved.
The final question I have is actually with regards. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I guess the final question I have is just the sparring versus this. It's always a question I ask because fighters have so many different philosophies, and so do coaches. With regard to sparring specifically, what is the curriculum, I guess, with sparring? Is there a lot of hard sparring at London Shoot Fighters? Do you guys focus more on drilling and technique and have like 1 day dedicated to sparring or 2 days dedicated to sparring, but mostly technical? What's your philosophy, and what is the coach's philosophies?
Yeah, that's what they say about London Shoot. But to be honest, for me, I don't think it's like too hard or something. I think we always feel safe. I never felt like they're gonna get hurt or something like that. But some people doesn't like that when it's sparring, we go at it. No one is really just touching. We going there. We fight, you know, and I think you're gonna have that element if you're gonna go into a fight. I think it's wrong. It's wrong having that feeling for the first time in the fight. You know, it doesn't have to be done all the time, but you have to be at that kind of, you know, state before going into the cage. Otherwise, you would never know if you're ready or not.
Of course. And I guess the last question I have is, what is your plan, I guess, going forward? You're now in the UFC. You had your huge performance. It was fantastic. Do you first? I know that I've spoken to some fighters, and some of them are like I'm going to take as many short notice fights as possible during this time. Would you want to take more short notice fights, or do you prefer having like a proper game planning session and proper camp as opposed to whatever the short notice is situation right now?
Of course, I'm already back in training just in case,
Right.
Something pops up. But like, I would like to have a full training camp,
Mhm.
before going back in there. But if something comes up along the side, I'm always ready. I don't feel like I'm out of shape or something. I'm still the same, so I'm ready to go.
Do you have anybody in particular you're looking towards towards trying to get booked with?
No, not really. My eyes is on the belt. Whoever gonna take me up there, I'm ready to fight.
All right, perfect. Well, Amir, I really do appreciate you taking the time. We're already over the amount of time you were able to allot for this, so I really do appreciate it. Before
Uh,
we, do you have any sponsors? Do you have anybody that you want to shout out? Other than, obviously London Shoe Fighters, any, fighter friends, agencies, whatever you'd like to. Please take the time, shout it out.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank my coaches at London Shoe, my training partners, Javed, Farid Bashra, good upcoming fighters. I want to thank Paradigm, Audi, Tim for hooking me up with this fight. And you're going to see more out of the Prince. And I want to thank also my sponsors, the Bloom, Plant and Equipment, and BXB. So thank you so much.
Of course. And Amir, thank you again for joining us, joining me on this interview. Fantastic performance. Congratulations again. I hope that we get to see you again soon, because your style is right up my alley. And I feel like a lot of people are going to really open their eyes when they see you continue to fight. And hopefully you get a nice main card slot next time. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. This has been another Fight Side interview with Amir Albazi. Make sure you go checking him out. Show him some love. Amir, do you have a Twitter or Instagram that you want to plug also?
Yeah, just Amir Albazi as it is on Instagram.
Perfect. So make sure you go and follow him on Instagram. Show him some love. Show him some support. And make sure you check out thefightsite.com. Go to the bottom for hyperbrandfly.com. The jiu-jitsu really does help us out. Make sure you check us out on Patreon. You can support us directly. Same with the merchandise shop. Like us, like the video on YouTube, and share and comment. It really does help us out as well. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating and a review. It really does help us. Amir, again, thank you so much for joining me. It really has been a pleasure, and I hope you have a great weekend and stay safe.
Thank you, man. Have a nice one.